Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Tailosive EV live on YouTube. It's been a hectic couple of weeks of news. Oh my God, so much Rivian talk, so much Tesla talk, so much Ford talk. Holy crap, it just keeps on coming. But uh, I finally kind of cut up on everything on my list that I definitely wanted to make a video for. And now today I was mainly just kind of waiting for a refresh thanks to Tesla Scope on Twitter. They've leaked things in the past. They have sources at Tesla, and they monitor Tesla's internal code pretty closely. And this has actually been something rumored for a while. Even people who have taken delivery of recent generation Model S's and X's have seen hardware hookups in the door panels that might eventually be used in ambient lighting. Tesla's weird sometimes like that, where they start designing a part a certain way but don't have the other part ready, so they ship it like that, even though it's probably not necessary if it's not going to be rocking ambient lighting. But yeah, it kind of makes sense to me. It's a very believable report because it's just kind of bringing feature parity to the Model S and X, which already I'm guessing don't have the highest amount of demand, especially with the refresh Model 3 now on the market and Model 3 Ludicrous launch is imminent. That could honestly happen any day now overseas, probably not in the US, but Model S and X, of course, are built in the United States. Also, the Cybertruck has a front bumper camera. We know that Hardware 4 has the hookups for a front bumper camera. There was rumors and leaks, you could even guess for a while, that the Model 3 was going to have a front bumper camera because Tesla's own website included images of the new Model 3 and you could see a front bumper camera. And then they quickly scrapped it and said, never mind, don't look at that. They didn't mention it, but they updated the website so that the Model 3 didn't have that anymore. But it makes sense that it's been in the works for a while, and that's the main leaks that Tesla Scope has provided. The interesting thing, if you go on their Twitter account, this is pretty much the most interesting thing they've talked about. So sorry, I don't have the link for you, and I don't feel like pulling up the tweet, but you'll have to take my word for it. You can look it up yourself. But within the replies of people asking about this, they're saying, hey, when is the Model S and X supposed to get ambient lighting in the front bumper camera? And they said today. I mean, they said they tweeted yesterday that it would be tomorrow, but yeah, they're saying starting March 1st is when they update the assembly line. So that should mean as we speak, Tesla's either shutting down the Model S and X assembly line or integrating these. I don't think they're incredibly complicated, but maybe there's more to it than I realize. A lot of people are easily impressed and wowed by ambient lighting, including myself. I really liked it in the Model 3 refresh that I got to play around with, but even in that video that I uploaded where I finally got to check one out and drive it around, I recall saying that, hey, the Model 3 has this ambient lighting. Why doesn't the Model S and X have that? Um, of course, the Model S and X are much more expensive vehicles, so shouldn't they at least have feature parity with the refresh Model 3 and all that? Ivan says, do you know if the ambient lighting will be like the new Model 3 or the Chinese Model Y? Uh, I don't think either because the interior dashboard is quite a bit different on the Model S and X than it is on the Refresh 3 or the Y. Because you've got an instrument cluster and you've got a larger display. Um, so I guess maybe you're asking, like, does it go past where the HVAC vents are, or does it go where the dashboard trim is? I haven't seen images of it. All I know, I don't have sources. I'm just going off of what Tesla Scope is reporting, but they've proven to be reputable in the past, so I believe them on this. It's not too outlandish of a leak because it absolutely sounds like something Tesla should do. If your cheapest model has something, your most expensive models should also have that thing too. Oh, thanks, Mike. Mike linked it in the chat here so you guys can read the tweets if you want to see it. Um, Ivan says, my money is on the former. Yeah, I don't think it'll be like the Chinese Model Y because that has a very different interior design anyway, where they just basically put a light strip across where the wood piece is on the legacy Model Y, except in China they changed it to more of a fabricy material. But there's still wood and carbon fiber inserts on the Model S and X. I expect the ambient lighting to kind of go around the displays a bit. Um, but yeah, probably closer to the refresh Model 3. Um, Jared Vegas says, I want a second subwoofer and thigh extensions in the S and X models. I completely agree with you, especially as we're getting to the point where the Model 3 and Y are becoming so affordable. They qualify for the tax credits, and now they got these big refreshes going for them. The Model S and X, in my opinion, are becoming harder and harder to justify at that insane expense. The Model S, I don't think, is ever going to qualify for the tax credits. There's just no way and no point to bring that vehicle down to $55,000, and Model 3 Ludicrous is probably going to be around that anyway. And the Model 3 Ludicrous is gaining a lot of Model S like features. So, in order to justify the $75,000 starting price of the Model S, they absolutely need to come up with some more luxury features. I don't care how bougie they are, you got to think of something. Thigh extensions would be a good one. Massaging seats are another one that's pretty standard on other luxury vehicles of that price point. I agree. It's a little over the top. Do I need massaging seats in my vehicle? No, but I don't want to spend $75,000 on a vehicle. So if you're trying to convince someone that they should spend that kind of money, you got to come up with some more things. Front bumper camera is a great one. I don't think at this point Tesla Scope was saying in the replies um, that the front bumper camera is not actually going to be used at this time to improve the performance of full self-driving beta. So I believe if you turn on FSD with the front bumper camera, no one's ever done that before because the Cybertruck's the only Tesla with the front bumper camera, and the Cybertruck still doesn't even have basic autopilot, so of course it doesn't have FSD beta. My guess would be is that has something to do with steer-by-wire, which has been my running thesis of all full self-driving beta developments, which is nothing is plug and play. You can't just take the software from one car and put it into another. Everything has to be kind of rethought. Um, and because the Cybertruck has that dynamic steering ratio where at high speeds it turns one way and at low speeds it turns another, that probably throws off all of the full self-driving beta code. So they have to kind of rework it or reteach it when it's on a vehicle that's steer by wire opposed to a vehicle that's steer by, linkage mechanically. Hey AP, joining a little late. Hope all is well. Good to hear from you. I hope you're enjoying your Model Y. Jackson says I'm starting work, so I can't catch the stream. Rest in peace, Apple Car. No worries, you'll be able to watch the stream after the fact if you want to. But why wouldn't Tesla put a front bumper camera on the new Model 3? My first guess would be cost. Uh, and like I said, it's probably not going to result in much difference in full self-driving performance, at least right now. I wish I could say in a future update they'll add performance, but I'm always hesitant to always. I'm always very, very skeptical when we bring up the maybe in a future update Tesla will blah 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 blah, because Tesla said after they removed ultrasonic sensors that they would add back all the features that ultrasonics allowed for in a future update, and that's been a year and a half now, close to a year and a half ago that they removed the ultrasonics, and they still have not brought back all the features. There's still no summon, there's still no smart summon, and there's still no auto park on um, Teslas that don't have ultrasonic sensors, even if you paid $15,000 for FSD, which they claim includes all those things. So, yeah, I'm very skeptical. Tesla's very busy, and they very much focus on the big picture all the time, which is, oh, that's just one little feature. We need to focus on solving level 4 or level 5 robotaxis. So they're focused on that. They're not going to focus on, hey, I paid for summon. Can I get that, please? Steer by wire on the S and X would be great, but probably not for a few years. I agree. It's probably too soon and too complicated to implement. It's a fairly intricate overhaul, although I totally want it. Every video, I've been addicted to watching Cybertruck videos, and I genuinely want to try steer by wire. I love so much of the new technology that went into the Cybertruck. The only thing I don't like is the size and the price. I'm not a truck person. I'm an efficiency guy, and I admire the 48-volt architecture. And I was actually rewatching Investor Day this morning because I realized Tesla Investor Day was 1 year ago. It was on March 1st, 2023. Stock price is almost identical. It was $200 a share then, and it's $200 a share now. So there's your Investor Day. Congratulations. The stock is the same. But I was going back again, looking at it, and just realizing that this next generation vehicle platform is going to be pretty interesting, even if it's not that unique of a design. I want it to be a unique design. I like radical rethinking of designs, and I love efficiency. So I was hoping for, Tesla's version of an Aptera, basically. I don't really care who makes a hyper efficient vehicle. I just want it to exist. Hyper efficient vehicle with NACS is kind of like my dream dream car situation. But the more I was thinking about and watching Investor Day, I was like, you know what? Even if Tesla doesn't make my dream vehicle and just makes it a hot hatch or a compact car, which is basically a Chevy Bolt with a Tesla logo, even that will be cool if they can get the price down, which I'm sure they can over time. But the other side of me is looking at how Cybertrucks in the used market are selling for 250,000 dollars, and the Foundation series they're keeping at 100,000. And I'm like, Tesla, you could charge a lot more than 100,000 for these trucks, but like Elon said on the earnings call, they're choosing not to. They're choosing to keep it relatively affordable. Only $100,000, so affordable. Thank you, Tesla. Um, but I was like, man, what if they do that with the next gen vehicle and they just say, well, it's supposed to be affordable, so we're going to make it affordable, but then how do you decide who gets it? Because so many people are going to want to pay 25,000 if it's just a little compact car. Doesn't have anything fancy, probably no ambient lighting, no ventilated seats, no rear mounted display, maybe crappy suspension. I don't know. At the same time, I'm kind of thinking out loud here, my thought process. At the same time, it feels like Tesla never really, when they introduce cheaper models, they don't really make them that much worse. They just try to justify the more expensive model with new features. Like when the Model 3 came out, it was honestly pretty comparable to the Model S and X in features and range. Um, but then over time, with the advancements they made the Model S and X more desirable. They increased the range, they increased the capability, and they gave it more responsive UI and all those kinds of things, more storage space and more efficient and all that. So part of me wonders, okay, maybe I don't get my dream, three-wheeler auto cycle that's super efficient or whatever. Maybe Tesla just makes a compact car that's kind of boring, but it's cheap because it's steer by wire and 48 volt architecture, and that in itself is cool enough. um and then they work on making the Model 3 and Y more desirable, which they kind of already have done, right? They're giving it the ventilated seating, the ambient lighting, and the rear display, and the improved uh sound quality on traveling on highway speeds, and the improved suspension and all that. So yeah, steer by wire. Yeah, I want steer by wire on more things, but the actuators and switching to 48 volt is, I think a lot of people have said whenever I suggest Tesla should bring steer by wire to the Model Y or the Model S and X, people always go, well, Drew, they said that they're only going to add it to new vehicles. Adding it to older vehicles is going to be too complicated. And then I'm like, but I don't want the Cybertruck and I can't afford the Roadster. I mean, I want it, but I don't. And I want parts of it, but not all of it. It's a weird thing. Um, could you see Tesla software restricting CarPlay to only Model S and X to increase demand one day? I won't say impossible, but it feels kind of unlikely. It seems like Tesla is not against CarPlay because it's too complicated. It's more of like a ideological difference. Like Tesla likes being vertically integrated. They like having control over everything. I like showing the data that says people want CarPlay and people are choosing certain cars over others simply due to CarPlay support, but I think Tesla's still going to just keep doubling down on, we can do software better. If you need CarPlay in the car, it's a sign that your infotainment design isn't good enough. So I want it, don't get me wrong, and I think that you could honestly make a better case for it in the Model S and X because they have a driver display. So you could leave the full self-driving visualizations, and you could still have a lot of car controls stay up on the driver display, and then the main display can just be fully CarPlay. But I feel like if they really wanted to, they would have done it by now. We're kind of seeing Tesla in a more demand constrained market. CarPlay is not a complicated software feature. You can put it in $50 little Android machines. CarPlay is really basic and they still haven't added it. So my guess is it's more of a philosophical issue they have with it, not a capability issue. Um, Bobbert Ross, that's a fun name. Super excited. I'm getting my first Tesla at the end of the year, still debating which one I'm going to get. Ooh, congratulations. I don't think there's really a wrong answer. Model 3 is amazing. Model Y is amazing. They're all great, but I hope you like it. Um, let's see. I hope the new Model S and X will have right-hand drive again. With Porsche launching the new Taycan update, facelift Model S can compete with this. I agree. I want them to ship it to more markets, especially if they're struggling to, find buyers for them. I would have to think steer-by-wire, shouldn't that help with developing right-hand drive options? Because there's less mechanical parts. You're just moving the wires from one end to the other. I'm sure there's a little bit of HVAC rearranging, but for the most part, I feel like that would simplify things. I'm no engineer, but that's my gut hunch. Um, what features do I think Tesla will next exchange to a microtransaction via app? Ooh. I hope nothing. I don't want more microtransactions, right? Um, let's see. What could they come up with? I guess they could start charging you extra for, mobile app controls, like preconditioning the car from the app. They could start saying that requires a Tesla membership or something. I don't know. I really hope they don't do that. That sounds really stupid. And it would just turn people off. I've seen Legacy Auto do it. They've done crap like that. Tesla used to, they still kind of do because these cars are still software locked, but there's older Model 3s that have rear heated seats, but you have to pay like $300 to unlock them or something. So they could technically keep doing that. I want a Tesla camper van, nothing more, nothing less. Well, I've got the next best thing for you, Jari, because I don't think this was talked about enough, and I thought this was really cool. So the Ford vehicles now have access to the Supercharger network. Please, if you own a Ford vehicle, claim your free charging adapter before June 30th. Basically, all you need is to prove that you own a Ford EV, and they'll send you one for free. But if you don't claim it before June 30th, then you have to pay $230 to get the adapter. So don't do that, please. There's going to be this awkward time period where from June 30th onward, you're going to have to pay to get the adapter, and the vehicles you buy from Ford are still going to have CCS, unless they have a trick up their sleeve. I hope they have a plan to switch over to NACS like sooner than anticipated. That would be awesome. Um, let's see. Let me close that. What are the odds the new platform will also carry over to SX3Y? Will it just be for a new model? Yeah, I don't. From what I understand, I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I've been wrong before, but from what I understand, there's a lot of next generation vehicle platform things that make sense when you're designing a new vehicle from the ground up that don't make sense to retrofit on an existing vehicle. And that's part of the reason we still don't have giga castings on the Model 3. A lot of people were kind of surprised by that. They were thinking like, the Model Y got these major castings and the simplification of parts and assembly. And we thought with the big Model 3 refresh, the Highland refresh, they would update all these things. So why not switch over to giga castings on the Model 3, simplify it, make it cheaper to mass produce? And they still didn't. They're still using the old fashioned underbody design that requires the welding of 70 different parts. And my guess is it's just too complicated, or the assembly line has to be shut down for such an extended period of time that it's not worth shutting down unless demand is just really, really dwindling. But I don't think that was happening with the Model 3 S or X. Um, hey, D3CT says, I got my Tesla using your referral code. Love the Model 3, but there are some things that could use some work. What do you think about a car with the exoskeleton that Tesla created? Well, it's funny you said thank you for using the referral code. I'm not exactly sure if it was mine or not because I've promoted so many different referral codes now, but thank you for using one anyway. Um, there's some debate on whether or not the Cybertruck is genuinely using an exoskeleton. I mean, there's not really a textbook definition in the automotive industry for what counts as an exoskeleton because the Cybertruck still very much relies on an underbody and castings. I don't think the mass is really pushed to the exterior. I think now the exoskeleton is mainly just Tesla's way of saying it's a very tough exterior. It's harder to dent than normal cars, but the Cybertrucks I've seen in person still had scratches. I mean, sure, you could probably buff them out, but I was like trying to rub them off. I thought they were just fingerprints, and I was really rubbing on it, and I was like, nope, that scratch isn't going away. So people might end up needing to baby their Cybertrucks a little bit more than Tesla thought. Um, oh, Cub Track. Am I pronouncing that right, Mike? Good to see you in the chat. That's Rivian Mike, who's we need to find a better name for because the Rivian isn't in the picture anymore. Ford may be retooling to NACS right now. Clearly they are resetting. That's what I'm hoping. So I don't know if you guys heard that, but the Ford F-150 Lightning has been they've halted production on it for unknown reasons. They said there's some kind of manufacturing defect. I'm wondering, is the manufacturing defect CCS? That would be wonderful. I really hope that's the case. They stopped building F150 Lightnings and Mach-E's because there's a manufacturing defect. The defect is they have the CCS port, so we need to fix that. Sorry, I was going to answer you earlier. Someone was saying that Tesla should do a camper van, and that ties into the Ford discussion. So Ford vehicles, including the e-Transit, Ford makes an electric van that you can buy. You don't have to be a business to buy it. Anybody can buy it. And even the e-Transit customers gain access to that adapter, that NAX adapter. In fact, the e-Transit charge port is actually on the hood. It's on the front, not on the side. So the e-Transit might actually fit at Superchargers now better than the F-150 Lightning and Mach-E because they have the charge port on the side, so they have to occupy two stalls when they plug in. So if you're looking for an electric delivery van with supercharging access, technically the Ford e-Transit might not be a horrible buy. Downside is the range is pretty bad. The charging speed is not great, but the upside is it's pretty affordable. You can buy e-Transits for 50 something thousand dollars. You can find them for under 60,000. I'm not sure if they qualify for the tax credit, but because they're optimized as delivery vans, um, they didn't put big battery packs in them. I think they only have like 60 kilowatt hours inside, but I think they max out at about 115 kilowatts. And I listened to Ford representatives talk about the adapter being available to e-Transit vans. So I'm pretty sure that means that e-Transits are capable of supercharging. But I haven't seen anyone attempt it yet. I hope someone tries though soon because I agree with you. I've been there, and I know a lot of people that like the van lifing or camper vans, and my big thing is, yep, I love the idea of like taking a big road trip with a camper van or a delivery van. I just don't want to pay for gas, and I don't want to use Electrify America, especially if the van is going to be low range. I think the E-Transit has something like 120, 130 miles of range. So it's not going to be something you can drive for hours and hours at a time, but if you have access to superchargers, you could probably do it. It's just going to involve you stopping a lot. Will prices go up for the new model S and X? S doesn't qualify for the tax credit anyway. They might. I think it's all dependent on demand. I don't think it's too dependent on refreshes. Like, for example, I thought the Model 3 would go way up in price when they refreshed it with the Highland updates. Excuse me. And they didn't really. I mean, the rear-wheel drive is still, I think, the exact same price it was when they refreshed it. The long range has gone up a little bit, but not much. I think they inched up a little. They launched it, and then a month went by, and they increased it by like $250, and then another 250. So it may be up like $1,000 more than when they refreshed it, but that's for a 48, 45. What is it? $46,000 vehicle. It's not that much. I was drinking water, but then I left my water inside. Um, A Tesla camper van would be cool, but I don't think it's high on their priority list. If the R2 isn't unveiled with NAX, we riot. Yeah, we better. We better. There's no way they could. I mean, if it's coming in 2026 and Rivian's making announcements now saying that their vehicles are going to access superchargers, I think this month, in the month of March, Ford got access first, and I believe Rivian is next. They're an option in the Tesla app when you go to the charge your other EV section. You can plug in exactly what your other EV is, and Rivian is one of the options. So um, I'd be very surprised if they unveil the R2 with a CCS port. Um, at least if there's renderings of it. I could understand, like, the Lucid Gravity was also unveiled with CCS, even though Lucid had already said they're switching to NACS. For the sake of it being a prototype, they might put CCS on it just because that's already working and accessible and it can plug into the Rivian Adventure Network for their testing and stuff. But I'm sure, I don't think the R2 is going to come out before Rivian switches to NACS natively on their own vehicles. I don't think it'll be ready that quick. It's still not supposed to come out until 2026, and I believe Rivian said they're going to switch to the NACS port on their vehicles in 2025. Um, did you check? Hey, Mike in the Woods, did I check out my sodium ion e-skate build? I don't know if I saw the e-skate. Is that the same thing as the snowboard? I watched the snowboard one. And I watched your camping in the woods with the Model 3 videos. Those are fun. They make me want to go camping. They make me like, I don't know, food when you eat it, hot food when you eat it outside just tastes so much better. And I don't know, please, guys, check out Mike in the Woods. He's got a great channel going there. Um, but I like what I see thus far. Manufacturers should also change the charge port to rear left or front right for cable length. I agree. Drew Baglino, I believe, was tweeting about that because they were making this announcement. There's this great shot Tesla put on their website of it's like a bunch of vehicles. They have a Hummer EV, a Model Y, a Cybertruck, and a Mach-E and a Rivian, and they're all next to each other at the supercharger. The funny thing is, in that picture, the charge port can't be reached on the Mach-E and the F-150 Lightning. So they're parked there, but they're technically not charging. It seems like Tesla's encouraging the automakers to relocate the charge port, but I don't think that's part of the NACS deal, like, or the supercharger deal, I should say. Anybody can use NACS, by the way. You don't need Tesla's permission to switch to NACS. It's a SAE agreed upon standard. Some people call it J3400, which I hate. I don't know why people keep using that name. They keep saying, well, that's the official name from the SAE standard, which is the same port design as NACS. And I'm just like, how many different names do we need? Now, for a while, we were calling it the Tesla connector. Now we're calling it NACS. Now you want to call it J3400. Just call it NACS. Like, that's simple. Why do you got to bring letters and numbers and code names? It's just like how I hate the name J1774 whatever. There's so many stupid names, like CCS, combined charging system, which is not a combined charging system. There's different kinds of CCS. It's kind of like USB. That's a stupid name too. Universal Serial Bus, but here's 50 different designs. Um, I hope that automakers are smart enough to relocate the charge port, but it doesn't seem like they are required to. You can, as proven by Ford and likely by Rivian here shortly, they've proven that you can access the supercharger network with an improper charge port location. But there's just a little bit of advice we need to get people used to, I think, when it comes to supercharging courtesy. It's probably going to result in a few headaches. I haven't seen any issues yet, but I'm sure it's coming and people are going to flip out when it happens. But it's just, there's going to be some growing pains involved with this EV transition. But I think in the end, it'll be worth it because most of the time, you're not supercharging at super busy chargers. Most EV customers, you charge from home and then you supercharge or you DC fast charge when you're on a road trip. And most of the time, at least with my experience, when you're on a road trip, the superchargers are rarely that full. I mean, sometimes they get a little busy, but for the most part, you arrive to a supercharger and there's 4 to 6 Teslas there and there's, 15 charging stalls. It depends on where you road trip, I guess. If you road trip through LA, it's going to be a very different story. But where I road trip, there's usually several stalls available, in which case, if an F-150 Lightning wants to plug in, I should be fine. I should have a stall available. But the best case scenario is that if your EV charge port is on the driver's side front, like an F-150 Lightning or a Mach-E or a Rivian, then hang to the right of the charger because there's a lot of chargers where, of course, they have, stalls that you can pull into, but then they have open parking spaces right next to those stalls. So if that's available, you can plug in your Lightning from a supercharger and not be occupying any stalls. And then if all of the front charge port vehicles hang to the right side, they can all stack up right next to each other. So you have a Lightning that's off to the right in a normal parking space, just long enough for the cable to reach. And then you can have a Mach-E parked next to him, right next to him, and the cable would still reach. Then you have a Rivian parked next to him, and the cable could still reach. So if all of the driver's side front charge port vehicles hang to the right, and all of the Tesla vehicles hang to the left, then we can technically all fit. Most people probably aren't going to be smart enough to realize that, unfortunately, but it should be possible. And then if it's a Hummer EV or a Silverado EV, the charge port is in the correct location. Um, so they can pull in and charge just like a Tesla does. Uh, and then it's a different problem with the GMP vehicles like the Hyundai Ioniq 5, the Ioniq 6, the Kia EV6, and the Kia EV9. They all have the charge port on the passenger side rear, which is, I guess, the same problem as driver side front. So they need to back in and hang to the right instead of pull in and hang to the right. So it's a little complicated. I agree. It would be a much smarter situation if we all had an agreed upon charge port location, or if we had more V4 superchargers because they have longer cables. But even the V4 supercharger I went to, yes, it had longer cables, but the stalls were positioned in a way that they weren't centered on the parking spaces. So I was very confused by the layout of that charger. I did a video on it because even though the cables are longer, a Rivian or a Ford is still going to occupy two spaces in order to plug in. So once again, all of the driver side front ports need to hang to the right, all of the Teslas need to hang to the left in order for it to work. So EV segregation is the solution. You Fords stay over there and us Teslas stay over here. Separate but equal. Oh, that's terrible. Anyway, the only thing keeping me in the Tesla camp now that NACS is the standard is full self-driving. As imperfect as it is, I can't imagine buying a vehicle without it. I use it daily on my commute. Yeah, it is pretty impressive. I was very wowed by version 12, I'll be honest. But I do think the wow factor for me would wear off because as impressive as it is, and it makes for a great YouTube video, especially when someone hasn't experienced it before, I could see myself even that day, we drove around with version 12 beta for several hours actually where we weren't recording. After a while you don't even think about it. After a while you're not even really using it. It's just on and you just supervise it. But the fact that I still have to keep my eyes on the road and my hands on the wheel makes it a lot harder to justify. So I could see myself buying an EV that doesn't have it someday. That doesn't bother me. But I'll give props to Ford for their plug and charge capability. Absolutely. Yes, totally. That I didn't expect it to be as easy as it ended up being. I thought it was going to be more like the Magic Dock thing, where it's like, okay, you have the adapter, but now you got to open the Tesla app and plug in the stall and then hit charge here and then swipe to charge. The fact that on day one, you're able to just put an adapter on any V3 charging post, plug in the car, and boom, it starts charging. I was like, dang, that's epic. That's amazing. Ford vehicles are way more cool now. Like I would consider buying one someday if the price was right, but there's other issues I have. It's more like how the software is designed that scares me. Looking at Ford vehicles, they don't tell you your charging speed. I don't like the dial on the screen. I always thought that was tacky. And I know it may sound like a small feature, but it's a feature I really use a lot, which is Tesla Theater. Me and my wife use that pretty regularly whenever we're supercharging. I love just pulling up YouTube or pulling up Hulu or whatever and just watching movies or shows or YouTube videos on our big screen and it's coming out the car speakers. Those kinds of features are what I would miss the most in a non-Tesla, but there's things they could add in a future software update, I'm sure. I don't want to have to watch all my movies on my phone or have to pack an iPad or my laptop with me and unpack the laptop and connect to the Bluetooth of the car to play the speaker. No, it's great to just have an infotainment that's well optimized and built in. Um, Full self-driving, I could live without that, but I do live without that. God forbid, but if your Tesla got totaled today and you had to buy a used gas car out of necessity, which three brands would you look into? Well, I still own a gas car, so I wouldn't buy one. I would just keep driving that one, and I would use the insurance money from this car being in a collision to buy a Tesla. I don't want to go back to driving a gas car daily. Um, if this car got wrecked, I would be rearranging funds very quickly to I'd probably get a used Model Y or something. There's some pretty cheap ones going now. Or I'd get the refresh Model 3. I love that a lot and it's not terribly unaffordable. So, I know what you're trying to ask me. Yeah, I know you need a new cheap gas car and you're asking which one I would look into. I don't know, pick your poison, whichever. I don't have a lot of. Some people are like, those Toyotas, man, they're flawless, they'll just run and run. And then I know a bunch of people that have had issues with their Toyotas. I have a friend that bought a pretty new Toyota. What was it, a Camry? Yeah, I think it was a Toyota Camry, and they bought it brand new, I think 6 or 7 years ago, and their HVAC died. And now they're having all these issues with it that are coming up, and they're looking at getting another car. And I was like, that's not even that old. Like, I would expect it to last much longer. All I have is anecdotal evidence, but my family has driven a lot of Hyundais, and they're not perfect, but for us, the Hyundai Sonatas have just had a hard time dying. I mean, mine is the first one our family bought. You know, sold it to the kids as they got older. But our Hyundai Sonata, which we still have, and it still works, but it's had issues with the starter. So the starter has been replaced, I think, 2 or 3 times. Um, Again, not an issue with an electric car, but it has 190,000 miles on it, and for the most part, everything still works. The HVAC needs to be recharged, but there's a leak in it, and to replace the whole HVAC is going to cost several grand, so we're not going to do that. You don't want to put several $1,000s into a vehicle that's got 200,000 miles on it, because as soon as you fix one thing, something else is probably going to go. I've done that before where, we had a head gasket blow on my first car, a Ford Ranger, and it was kind of old and we were a little hesitant about it, but we realized, you know what? Everything else about it is fine. It's a good truck and we like it. So we spent a couple grand on the head gasket replacement. And then, like 3 months after the head gasket replacement, the transmission was shot and then the whole vehicle was totaled. So we felt weird. We were like, we should have just totaled it earlier. Um, I hate that, honestly. I know that EVs, if we look over the life of them and you factor in the tire wear and you factor in out of warranty repairs for a more expensive vehicle, you factor in the more expensive insurance, the more expensive registration. I understand that EVs at this point might not be cheaper than owning cheap used gas cars, though they're definitely not cheaper, even factoring in gas savings. I still would rather own an EV. I would rather pay more money and own an EV than own a gas car, because there's so many people in my life I keep talking to that are in that exact same situation where it's like it has all these miles on it. This was shot. We're debating if it's worth replacing that or not replacing that, or do we just total it, or so much debates go on with that combustion engine. That stupid engine. I hate engines so much. There's so many things that go wrong, and as soon as you fix one thing, something else breaks, and I just hate having those constant decisions. I hate being like, oh, do you want a cheap repair or a longer term repair? The longer term repair is a good idea if you want to keep it for longer, but do I want to keep it for longer? Because what if something else goes out? I hate that. I hate all that. I like the simplicity of EVs. It's just like, well, is the battery working? Yes. Okay, we're probably good. I mean, other little things can break, I'm sure, like the seats or the mirrors. That's actually part of the reason I turned off easy entry, was because I'm convinced that I want to own this car for a fairly long time, and I don't want the little things to wear out, because I know Tesla out of warranty repairs are going to be expensive. So I try to I don't fold my mirrors in when I park, and I don't have the seat fold back and fold forward every time I get in and out. I'm trying to leave all the actuators and stuff so like none of them are working more than they need to. I use the frunk a lot more than the trunk because I don't want the powered lift gate to wear out over time. So it's little things like that that I'm like, I know those things are going to break and they're going to cost way more than I'm comfortable with. I'll probably get more into try to self-service my car when I get older. I'm not really a self-service guy, but when I'm older and the car's out of warranty, the financial incentive to work on my car is going to be much higher than it is right now. Um, a solid state car, yeah, exactly. Um, let's see. Where room allows, Tesla should set up future superchargers with an open parking space between chargers. I think that takes up more space. I think the best solution is to put V4 chargers with longer cables that can reach either side of the car in the center. That's the key. Not all the V4s do that, which is confusing to me. Some of them put them like off to the side in the middle of the space, but then the cable can't reach. Even if it's longer, it still can't reach the other side of the charge port. I think the best solution is to center the cable mounting point in the middle of the parking space and put them, you know, on the curb, off to the side of not to the side, centered in the parking section. That's the key. Long cables so that anybody can just pull in and they can only grab one cable and only one cable reaches. That way you avoid the confusion and you don't have to do this whole Ford's park on the right, Tesla's park on the left thing, which is going to be really confusing. Um, Let's see. What is Hummus Yummus asking about? Remember to not crash with steer by wire, says Ivan. Well, yeah, planes have been pure by wire for a while. The bigger issue is the feedback you feel through steering column while off-roading that gets lost in steer by wire. I don't know if they've been brake. Has there been a lot of brake by wire? I mean, there might be a wire controlling the brake pedal, but there's still brake fluid going to the brakes, which I've been listening to some of Future Oz's videos. He's a channel I really like. He's a funny guy. That Future Oz could do stand up. He's hilarious. Really nice YouTube channel there he's got going. And he brought up some points that really stood out to me about brake by wire and how they're probably going to do that with the next generation vehicle platform, because the unboxed process that they talked about at Investor Day, where you build each component of the vehicle separately instead of on a line where you stamp it, assemble it, paint it, and then you got to take everything off and then paint it again and do all this complexity. They said lots of companies want to do the unboxed process, but they can't because of things like brake fluid and um, the amount of wiring that goes on. But if you connect all of your controllers via Ethernet and you rely on steer by wire and accelerate by wire and brake by wire, and he even talked about potentially beefing up the motors so that the regen can be a lot stronger to get to the point where you can bypass brake pads. I don't know if that's legal. I just thought the idea was cool. And it's not unheard of, like in the E1, like Formula One racing with electric cars, they have these really fancy powertrains that can regen so hard that they can stop you just about as fast as a brake pad would, and then you can skip the whole brake pad process, which saves on time and stuff. I don't know. Interesting ideas he was speculating on over there. I have no idea if that's engineering wise possible or legally possible, but I love the idea that you kind of need to have more in-house design controllers, and you need to do more things by wire with a 48 volt architecture in order to make that unboxed process works. In order to get that manufacturing method to function, you need all of this vertical integration that Tesla can do that no one else really can. Hearing him talk about it actually got me way more excited for the next gen vehicle platform than Tesla ever did. Um, Which other companies would just put the port like front right or back left? Yeah, well, when they were designing their cars, they didn't know that superchargers were going to be open to them. Now they probably wish they would have designed it differently. Like Rivian seems to prefer putting the charge port on the front for towing reasons, because if you got a trailer, you can just pull right in. You don't have to unhook the trailer to charge, which I do think is a valid argument. A lot of people prefer that charge port location. So if I were them, if I was Rivian adopting the NAX port, I would just put it on the passenger side front, which there are some drawbacks to. People say that it's farther from the driver's seat, and the driver's seat, of course, is the most commonly used seat. So it's a little bit annoying when you get home if you have to plug it in on the right side instead of the left side all the time. But I think it's a worthy compromise. Like, I would rather be able to use any supercharger stall and not worry about it. But it's also one of those debates of like, do we really want to redesign the whole vehicle just for V3 charging cables? Because long term, we should have V4 charging cables that can reach you anyway. So why not just leave it where it is? And that's a more convenient location for customers. So yeah, it goes back and forth. Um, let's see. I'm sure it's reliable, especially since commercial planes use it. I've just heard it can get used to the quick turn. I've just heard it can get used to the quick turning. I hope it becomes mainstream. Well, I think to make steer by wire practical, it needs to be 48 volt, and 48 volt is just not an off the shelf component that a lot of people can buy from. You kind of have to design it for your vehicles from the ground up, which Tesla's so vertically integrated, they can do that, but most other startups definitely can't do it, and legacy automakers already have a hard time doing it. Formula E, thank you. Thanks for that. That's what it's called. When am I taking delivery of my F-150 Lightning? If I needed a truck, that's pretty much what I would buy right now. I don't need a pickup, and I'm more of an efficiency guy. But Rivians are great. Don't get me wrong. I love Rivians, but they're just too dang expensive. And I can find F-150 Lightnings now available for delivery at dealer lots that are in the mid $50,000 range, and I think that's before rebates. I think they qualify for some credits, And now knowing that I can take him to Superchargers, sorry, heck yeah, that truck's hard to beat. The Cybertruck is cool, and I love the Cybertruck, of course, but yeah, if you want one right now, it's a minimum of $100,000. Probably more if you buy one used, because those are selling for like north of $200,000. It's a pain in the butt to get a Cybertruck right now, and from what I can tell, um, it sounds like it's probably gonna be that way for a while. The demand is so high for them. I think Tesla's gonna just keep selling Foundation Series for probably most of 2024. I hope I'm wrong, but it's really feeling like a bunch of people are willing to pay top dollar for that truck, and all the celebrities driving them around is not helping. I'm sure Justin Bieber tows all the time, and he needs a 6-foot bed to move around all of his equipment and mulch and all the construction and yard work and camping Justin Bieber does. No, of course. All the celebrities are buying it just because it looks cool. I mean, I can't deny that. It does look cool. I love looking at them, but it's in many ways it's still Tesla's Hummer. It's like, okay, I get what you're going for, Franz. You wanted it to be functional and utility focused, but also a piece of art. And sure, it's a gorgeous piece of art. I agree, it is beautiful, but that also means you probably have convinced a bunch of people to buy it that were probably driving more efficient vehicles before that. I bet a bunch of people are that used to drive Model Ys and 3s are now going to be driving Cybertrucks and using way more energy than they were before. But if I needed a truck, yeah, F150 Lightning would be my choice at this point, just because it's pretty much the cheapest and it can supercharge, which who cares? Who cares what your range is? As long as you got access to superchargers, you can go wherever you need to go. I would never go to Electrify America at this point. At this point, I just don't think I ever will. I don't think I'll ever need to. I can't think of a situation where it would come up. I hope I never have to go there. At the very least, have parking stalls on both sides of the chargers. Well, that's I think what he was suggesting earlier, but then that takes up more spaces. It takes up more space, and they have to usually pay by the square footage of the charging stalls they occupy. They either have to pay rent or they have to pay for the parking spaces to whoever owns the parking lot. So I don't think it would be. Also, it can still confuse drivers. You can have two spaces, but if the driver picks the wrong space, then you're still occupying two spaces. Austin says, is power share vehicle to grid a big selling point for you? Tesla has a sleeper feature on their hands. Power share means the car is not just a car, but also the biggest power bank. I agree. Yeah, it is a huge feature for me, especially as the grid is getting more and more expensive. There's been so many situations where we're starting to watch our power consumption, because where we live it's freaking 35 cents a kilowatt hour. It's probably some of the most expensive electricity in the country. At peak hours it's like 56 cents a kilowatt hour. It's insane. The utility rates have gotten so expensive that EVs are not really cost competitive with gas cars, at least when it comes to fueling. If EVs get cheaper than new gas cars, it's a different story, I guess, where it's just cheaper up front. But cost of electricity versus cost of fuel is getting close to nothing, like close to hard to measure. Um, so power share is a huge selling point to me, because it would involve, for one, if the grid goes down, I can power the house off the car. But for two, I could charge the car on off peak hours and then power the house during peak hours, so I don't have to pay that 56 cents a kilowatt hour that we do in the middle of the day. And it kills me how much, like, we were measuring our home's energy consumption. And that's the other thing I have a hard time justifying with solar. Our house does not use that much power. Like, where we had a day where we're like, okay, if we don't run the heat, let's see how much energy the house uses. Like, if we're not running heating or cooling or any of that, if there's no HVAC use and it's just we're watching TV or I'm working or we're using the lights in the kitchen and the microwave and all the basic stuff, if we just have a normal day, how much energy does our house consume? And it was like 4 kilowatt hours. It was like 4 kilowatt hours, and we're paying 35 cents for that. I would rather just pull that from the car. I mean, partly because I'm in a unique situation where, thanks to you guys using my referral codes, I can charge this car for free at Superchargers. So there's a part of me that's like, man, I really want an EV with power share so that I could charge the car for free, take it home, power the house with the free electricity. But I don't know, that feels a little tacky and maybe not sustainable because now my car range is going to drip down even more than it already does. And I don't know how long the referral program is going to last. So I'm not going to go like out of my way to go buy a power share equipped EV like soon. I'm not going to be like, okay, I got to buy $100,000 Cybertruck so I can lower my electric bill. But like we were looking at our bill and it's like only the electricity part of it, the gas is another thing. We use a lot of natural gas because it's an older house and it has the hookups for that. And switching everything over to all electric is going to be a big expense too. But the electricity part of our bill was $75 for the month. And I was like, okay, so that means if we never pulled a single kilowatt hour from the grid and somehow I spent $100,000 on a Cybertruck and used power share, and I got the equipment because you need to buy an inverter, you need to buy the not an inverter for all of that, which would probably be well over $100,000, and I never pulled a single kilowatt hour from the grid. The most I can save is $75 a month, unless it's a summer month where I run the HVAC more. Maybe it's $150 a month, so I can save $150 to $100 a month. That ends up being $1,500 a year in saved electricity costs. Is it worth spending $100,000 to save $1,500 a year? No, it doesn't really make sense. It's more economical to just pay your bill, and if you have extra cash lying around, invest it in some stock. Not investment advice, but invest it in the stock market, even if it's not Tesla or Rivian or some individual stock. Even in just the S&P 500, you'll probably get a much better return on your investment than expecting the Cybertruck to save you money. Especially if the referral program changes and suddenly you can't get free supercharging anymore, then the whole equation falls apart. Now you've got a more expensive EV to charge with your expensive home charging. You think renewable power will make electricity cheaper? Uh, for the utility, yes. For the individual, probably not. I think that there's a lot of cost to maintain and upkeep the grid, and those costs are going up faster than the cost to produce electricity is dropping. I've seen a lot of people with this mindset that, oh, with solar and wind, we'll get to a point where electricity is basically free, and I don't believe that. There's a lot of people that can't put solar on their house because, for one, they don't own their house every year because of the rising cost of real estate and uh, land appreciating faster than the average income goes up. There's a widening gap every year between housing costs and average income. Basically, housing costs are growing faster than incomes are. So that results in more people renting. A lot of people live in apartment buildings, more and more having to live in apartment buildings because they can't afford to buy a house or they can't afford to rent a house. And an apartment building, you can't buy solar. You can't decide where your power is coming from. So those situations are unique and different, and power consumption is going up, and because of electric vehicles, and also just because the temperature of Earth is rising, especially in the summertime, and there's more temperature fluctuations, so more people use electricity for the heating. And California is not helping, of course, when they crack down on what types of heating you can use, like they ban burning of wood boxes or stoves, and natural gas isn't allowed anymore. So there's all these things. I don't think it's going to get cheaper. I hope I'm wrong. Mike did the math for me. Thank you. We'll take you 66 plus years for return on investment. Assuming the referral program never changes, and assuming the Cybertruck lasts 66 plus years. I don't think it will, personally. I mean, I'm sure the Cybertruck will probably last a good long while, but 66 plus years is pretty out there for any car. Um, let's see. At the Tesla Semi Unveil event, Elon promised 7 cents per kilowatt for the Megachargers. Do you think they'll be in the ballpark for that? Heck no. Tesla doesn't get to decide what the electricity costs. They're just building in the plugs. He also promised it would be built in 2019, and that didn't happen. He also promised it would be $150,000, and I don't think it was that much. Um, let's see. 4 kilowatt hours per day. I don't know how much it is. I'm just not sure what you meant. Yeah, 4 kilowatt hours for the day in terms of electricity. We're also using natural gas, which contributes to the power bill, but I bring that up because Cybertruck's not going to help lower our natural gas bill. Um, 4 kilowatts is a power current. It's not a power amount. It's not a unit measurement. Kilowatt hours is a unit measurement. Um, can't wait for the day when dealers are no longer a third party. That's one of the reasons for EV transactions going so slow, because they're marking them up so high. Ours didn't have much of a markup. In fact, they were, I think, marking it down with some rebates or something. Better off getting an F-150 Lightning, just a measly 40 years. Well, even then, the Ford F-150 Lightning wouldn't get the free charging, so that throws off the whole. I think it would be more than that, because you'd still be charging from home at third, and it'd be more inefficient than the Model 3, which my Model 3, because it's a Tesla, can charge for free. So no, I would definitely objectively cost me more. Even if I found a way to power my house through the F-150 Lightning, I would still have to charge it from the grid or a supercharger. And it's not going to be free either way. Because non-Teslas have to pay more for supercharging. That's one little detail I forgot to include in my video yesterday. They tend to charge non-Teslas about 30% more unless you get the membership. If you pay $13 a month, then you pay the same price as Teslas for supercharging. But then you're also paying $13 a month, so it's not really the same. Kind of insane how my 2021 Model 3 was $40,000 and it's still roughly that same price, but with way higher interest. Yeah, that's a very different time, huh? What I think they need to start doing now is make EVs with small motors less powerful to make them a lot more efficient. I mean, you have more range. Yeah, I don't think the motors are the biggest problem. I think it's the size, personally. Like, our motors are pretty dang efficient as is. I don't think companies, when they're designing these electric vehicle powertrains, are putting in all of this extra time and money to make them powerful. They're fairly efficient. You need to be somewhat powerful in order to move a 4,000-pound object, which, most EVs are pretty big, pretty heavy. Um, and you can make those fairly efficient. The efficiency with electric powertrains in regards to how many losses there are with, electricity put into the car and then distance moved. Most electric vehicles are around 90, 93, 94% efficient, which is not the same thing at all with gas vehicles or even hydrogen vehicles. Hydrogen losses are at, like 40% or 50% or something like that. Gas vehicles, I think, are at like 20%. So, like, 70% of the energy you put into it is lost to sound, carbon monoxide emissions, and motion of the engine with all the pistons moving and the transmission and the axles and all this. There's so much losses involved. But with the electric vehicle powertrain, you're already at 90%. So if you pushed it all the way to 100%, which is impossible, there's always going to be losses. But even if you found a way to push it all the way to 100%, you'd only save 10% of energy. It wouldn't make a big drastic difference. So I don't think it's a powertrain problem personally. I think it's a size problem. Um, the bigger problem is aerodynamics. When you're at highway speed, about 60 to 70% of your losses is just moving air out of the way. This is why I'm such a big fan of the Apteras, because they're the ones actually trying to make a noticeable step change and improvement when it comes to electric vehicle efficiency. If we want them to be cheaper, we need to use smaller battery packs. But if you want the same range, you need a more aerodynamic design. So that's why I'm in favor of Tesla doing something more radical with the next generation vehicle platform. We need to rethink the size of our vehicles, because there's way too many people convinced that we all need to be driving around these tanks, these F-150s and these Chevy Suburbans, and that's your biggest loss leader. As long as we insist on having these big, blocky, large vehicles, you're going to be wasting most of your energy um, pushing air out of the way. It doesn't matter if you had a perfectly efficient powertrain, which doesn't exist. It's not possible. Even if the powertrain was 100% efficient, if you're moving that much air out of the way, you're going to need a big battery pack. And if you need a big battery pack, the cost to manufacture is going to be high. So I think Tesla's working on making the cost to build the powertrain much less, but I don't think it's a big piece of the overall puzzle. It still comes down to size of the battery, size of the car. Aptera is a good case study on that. Yeah, even if Aptera never makes it, I think they're incredibly educational to what makes EV range better and what makes efficiency better. There's a lot we could all learn from Aptera. Um, Cubtrack says, nice solution, parking to the right. Likely will never happen. A bit of kindness will go a long way. We still have disputes at gas pumps. I don't know if Cubtrack is way earlier in the stream, but yes, thank you. Toyota cut the price of the Mori by 12,000 because no one is buying. I don't know what the Mori is. Did you mean the Mirai? Is that how it's spelled? The hydrogen car? Yeah, no one wants to pay. No one wants a hydrogen car. Ivan says, what's your average watt hours per mile? I'm at 235, I think. I'd probably be lower if I drove more in the city, but almost 80 to 90% of my driving is on the freeway because I'm driving to the airport like all the time for all my friends and family members. I should probably be charging them money, huh? But they're friends and family. I don't care. And we get to drive around for free anyway. So it does take up some of my time, but I'm actually going to the airport after this. Um, Quebec says, I would not purchase a CCS car now. Heck no. I wouldn't either. Um, I just plugged a tire on my Model 3 Performance today. It was fun. Oh, plugged. Does that mean you patched it or you got a flat? Congrats, or I'm sorry. My Mark Sparks says, I think there needs to be a national law against icing EV chargers. I see ice cars on a regular basis at my closest supercharger. Yeah, it's just like all laws, it's about enforcing them. Who's going to enforce it? It's not about making them. I feel bad for all the people who buy it thinking hydrogen is the answer. Oh God, if anyone actually thinks about it, they'll realize it's a horrible idea. I can't believe it's still debatable. I can't believe that we're still talking about it. Like I explained it to my wife. I was like, hydrogen fuel cells have like something like 40% losses involved, which is why hydrogen will always objectively cost more than electricity. For someone, maybe a company subsidizes it for you, but it doesn't matter. It's still going to be more expensive than an EV. And the range, even for fuel cells, is not honestly that much better. Because they still need fairly large battery packs and they still need to store the hydrogen fuel cells, and the fuel cells extra weight, extra complexity, and the hydrogen tanks have to be compressed. It's just like there's no way around it. There's no engineering around the fact that there's more steps, more processes, more losses, no matter how good the system gets. And there's still people debating whether or not it's worth it. Um, Aptera needs to figure out how to get a sedan to fill close to 40 miles a day from solar charging. I don't think that's the hard part. I think they know how to do that. The question is, can you get funding together to bring that vehicle to market? Sedans and four-wheeled vehicles are just objectively far more expensive uh, to get legally acceptable. They have to go through a lot more testing and government approval before they can get out on the road. That's the main reason Aptera is starting with the three-wheeled auto cycle. For one, they're an efficiency focused company, and that's a very efficient vehicle. But for two, they get to skip a lot of those complicated regulatory steps when they're bringing an auto cycle to market versus a four-wheeled automobile to market. Um, and it's also just a lot less complexity when you're a young startup. You don't have a lot of funds to, sedans. Honestly, I'll just spoil it for you. The solution is making a sedan that's very, very aerodynamic, probably very small frontal area. So you make it low to the ground. You make it short, but you make it as aerodynamic as possible, and then you cover the thing with solar cells. And as long as you can hit 5 miles per kilowatt hour and about 1,400 watts of solar, then boom, you still get the same 40 miles a day. That's how Aptera is targeting 40 miles of range now, is they're hitting 10 miles per kilowatt hour through a super aerodynamic design. And then you put 700 watts of solar on it, which can get in a sunny climate up to 4 kilowatt hours a day. 4 kilowatt hours takes you 40 miles. So to double that up, obviously, if you want to make a four-wheeled vehicle that can sit 5 people or whatever, you need it to be a bit bigger, which is going to make it less efficient, but it just means you need more solar. So as long as you can get a sedan to 5 miles per kilowatt hour and fit 1,400 watts of solar, then the math still checks out. But it's just 1,400 watts of solar and a bigger vehicle that's going to require more doors, more seats, more motors, more wheels, more complexity. All of that takes more money, more upfront investment before it can get out into the market. So it's for capital reasons that they're starting, I think, with the three-wheeler. There's a lot of financial incentive to build your company up from that, but getting investors on board is very challenging. I don't think people understand that. And especially when you're making a really radically different looking vehicle. People have a hard time investing in it, which is a shame. I would give Aptura all the money if I had it, but I could sell my house, I could sell all my retirement accounts and give all of it to Aptera and it still wouldn't be enough. So they need they've raised a lot through crowdfunding, but they definitely need a whale investor, and I hope they find one soon. How long until Elon claims they can get 100% efficiency? Oh God, I hope never. Um, Even Shell is shutting down their hydrogen stations, so for all the people who buy one, it's going to get harder and harder to fill up. Yeah, there's not even like hydrogen stations outside of California, so I don't know why it's up for debate. Um, let's see. New York City roads aren't nice to low profile Pirellis. Had to plug a nail. Ooh, yikes. That's not fun. The Model S and X needs to gain access to right-hand drive markets. I'm sick of not having a premium Tesla offering, genuinely pissing me off. I want an S Plaid. I want the massive range, stupid speed, all with a hatch. I'm with you. I'm totally there. I'm confused too. I guess they decided that the complexity of a right-hand drive model would just not be worth um the money they would generate shipping it overseas. I have a hard time believing that, but I guess it's true. Um or I guess they were busy enough. I don't know. Maybe the margins aren't great on the Model S and X, so to sell them overseas, they would have to charge a lot more for them, and that makes them feel weird about releasing them there. I don't know. I can't get inside their head. Do you think Aptera should partner with Tesla? I mean, Aptera should partner with whoever they got to partner with to get it in the market. I'm so passionate just about the product. I don't care which brand it is. If Toyota came out tomorrow and said we're going to make a solar powered car that looks very similar to the Aptera, then I would become a Toyota fanboy. It's not some association with the brand. It's just the product should exist in some way, shape, or form. I think there should be multiple variants of that product. That should be a whole category. There should be a category for hyper efficient, lower weight, you know, uh, when the efficiency reaches a point that the solar charging actually starts to become meaningful. I don't think just Aptera should be the only company making products like that. I think all kinds of companies should make products like that. You could have one that's a little bit narrower, that's maybe more less, outward mounted wheels and maybe more internal mounted wheels, or maybe one that has four wheels, but just the back wheels are mounted more inward of each other instead of just one wheel in the back. I don't know. Imagine Aptera body with Tesla. I don't think Tesla would partner with them. Tesla doesn't need Aptera. Aptera needs anybody that can get them into production. So I'm pretty sure at this point Aptera would partner with anyone that would, but Tesla doesn't have much to gain from what I can see. Tesla could, in a heartbeat, just recreate all of the things Aptera's already made if they wanted to. But Tesla is all about widespread, making as many vehicles as possible. So if the vehicle design is even relatively niche, Tesla's not interested in it. Even though I don't think the Aptera would be that niche, there's just not a lot of proven market demand for it yet, but I think there would be if the product came out. It's kind of carving out a new product. It's like it stands on its own. I don't think it really compares to that much else on the market, but I wish Tesla and other companies would make something that would come close to it at least, because I think there needs to be more options for solar mobility. It kills me that Aptera is the only company trying to make that happen. Apple decided it wasn't easy to do even with all their cash. I know, it's quite telling. I think part of the Apple Car program was just bad management, though. They didn't have a very clear vision on it. It sounded like for a lot of the time there were people wanting for much of the Project Titan history, they wanted it to be a robotaxi. It wasn't going to be a car you could buy and own. It was just going to be like a Google Waymo. It was just going to be a custom Apple car that they slowly roll out in selective cities that drive you around, but you don't have control over them. And then a couple of years ago, they decided that was too hard. Let's try to make it a car you can actually buy and own. And they probably just realized they couldn't come up with anything that would be that different from what's already out on the market. They were like, okay, if we try to make a luxury, expensive sedan, it's just going to be another Lucid or another Mercedes, and we don't want to just be another one of those guys. Um, so I think Apple definitely had the cash. It just probably wasn't managed properly. Aptera might be better off because it will not have yet another competitive automotive manufacturer. Well, I don't think the Apple car was going to come anywhere close to competing with Aptera. I still personally believe that the best solution possible for both companies would have been Apple buying Aptera because we agree, I think most of us would agree, that the three wheeler with the two seats, there's potentially a fairly big market for it, but it wasn't going to be bigger than, the sedan market. It wasn't, Aptera with three wheels and two seats probably wasn't going to be bigger than the SUV or the pickup truck market. It was going to be somewhat niche, but I think it was still, Aptera was still targeting, they're hoping for like 20,000 vehicles a year. So, not insane numbers, but they I think believe they could get profitability between 20 and 40,000 vehicles a year. So, the point being that Apple could buy Aptera when they're proven and they're close to having all of the funds necessary to start to production and they're tooling up for their manufacturing lines, but at the same time Aptera's real breadwinner, the next vehicle that's going to have more doors and more seats and more wheels, a real automobile instead of an auto cycle, that Apple could have more control over. So now would be a great time because Apple's decided that they're not going to go forward with their own car project. Aptera needs the funding. Apple has all the funding. Apple has way more money than they need. Aptera has said that they could reach volume production with, less than $50 million. So Apple's got Apple spent $10 billion on their car, which has been canceled over the course of 10 years. So all you need, Apple, is to give Aptera, well, give them a little more than they need so they can build up their service. And I'm sure Apple could integrate their displays and their silicon to power the infotainment and everything, and maybe even their cameras. And Tim Cook could provide all of the supply chain they need, and I think they're a perfect fit because Apple's all about efficiency with their silicon. They bragged about how many kilowatt hours their Macs will save you over the course of their lifetime. So if Apple's all about efficiency and they're all about thinking different and they want to enter the market in a unique and different way, then I would say, yeah, buy a small company like Aptera, either buy them out or partner with them. Either one, I don't care. And it would be a drop. It would be practically nothing for Apple. So Aptera says they need like what, 40, $50 million. Apple just gives them $100 million, and they can gear up for production, build out their service network, and even start saying like, hey, we're going to put, Aptera service technicians at Apple stores. And Apple's trying to get more into right to repair by expanding their self-service program. And, there's been a lot of public backlash and government scrutiny saying Apple doesn't allow enough right to repair. So Aptera is a right to repair company. The vehicle's designed from the ground up to be very repairable. So Apple could say, see, we're getting into a more repairable product category. Um, and the three wheeler is not going to be like Aptera's big moment. I think Aptera's bigger moment is going to be when they do a larger vehicle that can sit more and have more functionality and probably have more solar cells. So Apple could have a hand in bringing their own technology and also designing that bigger car. And maybe they just call the three wheeler the Aptera, and then the bigger one, even though Aptera is the one helping design it and manufacture it, they call the bigger one the Apple car. And the Aptera is just what we refer to when we're talking about the three wheeler. I think it'd be a match made in heaven. I think the companies would get along great. They share a lot of design philosophies about like removing things that don't need to be there. Apple's always, removing ports, removing buttons and that kind of thing. Um, I think it'd be perfect, but I don't know. Apple, I guess, just doesn't think the margins are good enough. Um, let's see. I need more entertainment apps in the Tesla. Yeah, it has more entertainment apps than anything else, and it's still not enough. Huh? I still want a Tesla App Store. People were promising me that for years, and it still didn't happen. Drew in 2040. Today I'm comparing the BZ1Y to the Fiat 300e, Ford Fiesta Mach-E, and tried interrupt Terra that started this three-wheeled SCV craze. I would love that. I'm all in favor of the three-wheeled solar market taking off. Do I think smaller EVs should have monster charging curves so they charge faster, like how a small gas car can fill up faster because smaller tank? Um, charging curve is somewhat important, but that's the other advantage of hyper efficient vehicles like the ones I'm talking about. If you make vehicles that can go 7 miles per kilowatt hour, or 8 or 10 miles per kilowatt hour, then you don't really need a great charging curve. Because if you're like the Aptera is targeting 10 miles per kilowatt hour, okay, well now you only need to hit 60 kilowatts, and that's 600 miles an hour. That's about as fast as my Model 3 can supercharge at its peak charge speed. Even though it's 150, 170 kilowatts, that translates to about 600 miles an hour. So my Model 3 needs to hit 170 kilowatts in order to hit what the Aptera can hit at 60 kilowatts. And with more efficient designs, you don't have to precondition the battery as much. You don't need as aggressive battery management systems if the car only has to charge at 60 kilowatts, which I believe is part of the reason the Chevy Bolt is so cheap. I mean, I don't think the Bolt was profitable, but the Chevy Bolt was much, much cheaper than even Tesla's when it was around. You could buy them for like $26,000. Um, and they had meaningful range. They still had a big battery pack, but part of the reason they were so cheap was because the battery management system wasn't too complicated, and they peaked out at about 50 kilowatts. So because the Chevy Bolt was not terribly efficient, 50 kilowatts didn't translate into that great of a charging speed. But if you have a vehicle that can achieve 8, 9, or 10 miles per kilowatt hour, then you can just leave it at 50, 60 kilowatts, which doesn't sound very good. But then when you see, oh, that translates to 400, 500, 600 miles an hour, then 50 kilowatts is livable. You can get by with that. Well, GM canceled it because they were losing too much money on it, I'm pretty sure. Cybertruck can top off at 350 kilowatts, but it's just the current dispensers limited to 250 kilowatts, right? I don't think it's the dispensers that are limited, but yeah, you're on the right track. It's the cabinets on the back end that are limited. I've heard people talking about, I think even Tesla Scope was talking about this on their thread last night. They said that there's a chance Tesla has found a way to improve the existing Model S and X and maybe even the Model Y, um, to go above 250 kilowatts, even with V3. I don't think the dispensers currently at V3 are capped at 250 kilowatts. It's the cars that are capped at 250. And there's just never really been a car that could pull more than that from, the 500 voltage architecture. But there's a chance. I don't know how long it would last or if the software updates are coming or whatever. But Tesla Scope was describing Model S's and X's not needing to get upgraded to 800 volts, but still being able to get up to like 300 kilowatts, 312 kilowatts. Yeah, Lars told us that the Cybertruck can go up to 350 kilowatts, even though there's currently no V4 cabinets on the back end that are capable of outputting that much. So pretty much all Cybertrucks are capped at 250 kilowatts now. And not a great charging curve, I may add, but I think that may be something to do with splitting the pack in two. I think when you split the battery pack in two, that probably affects how good the charging curve could be. Um, so I get that there's some obsession with the higher currents. Everyone's going, oh, how do we get to 300 kilowatts? And then how do we get to 350 kilowatts? And how do we get to 450 kilowatts? And I think that's just going to involve way more preconditioning and way more expensive infrastructure. And what is going to be a lot more practical is figuring out how to make EVs get more miles per kilowatt hour so that you don't need all those kilowatts. What would be beautiful is if, an Aptera with the 10 miles per kilowatt hour efficiency, with that battery pack getting 100 kilowatts, that's 1,000 miles an hour. But now, if you upgrade the battery pack in the future with higher voltage architecture or better preconditioning, which they should gain access to as they mature as a company, um, now if an Aptera can accept 200 kilowatts or just 300 kilowatts, that translates to 2,000, 3,000 miles an hour. No EV is coming close to that, but an Aptera could with present day charging speed. We charge EVs at 200 kilowatts all the time. As soon as you figure out how to get 200 kilowatts into an Aptera, probably requires a bigger battery pack, sure. Probably would only work on the 100 kilowatt hour battery pack version, but still, with that battery pack, you could get twice the miles added into the battery that we're getting now, the 2,000, 3,000 miles an hour. that's when you're starting to rival gas station speeds. 3,000 miles an hour. That's nuts. Um, Aptera is really on my radar for the next three wheel. It will replace my Can-Am three wheeler. I think it's on a lot of people's radar for just next vehicle. I think a lot of people, including myself, that would never buy a three wheeler are now considering a three wheeler because the Aptera is so car like anyway. Um, I believe they want to put the Bolt on the Ultium battery system, but need to take a break to review the design. Yeah, I think they need to find a way to make it profitable. I also really hope they relocate the charge port location so that it's supercharger friendly. Um, But anyway, I've been live for a while and I think I need to hit the road here, so I'm going to sign off. But I appreciate you all for signing in. I love talking about this kinds of stuff. So hopefully any day now we're going to see ambient lighting and the front bumper camera come to the Model S and X, which I agree they're in desperate need of. They need to have feature parity with the Cybertruck if they're going to be that expensive. So to justify their existence, let's update them. Um, Okay, one last question from Hasiel. If Aptera fails and nobody adopts solar on EVs as well as teardrop design and a primary focus on efficiency, will you feel like you didn't do a good enough job informing? No, I think I did everything I could. I've done so many videos on Aptera. I'm not gonna say the entire success of the company is based on how my channel performs because I'm a relatively small piece of the puzzle. There's much bigger channels that have covered Aptera, that have probably introduced way more people to the brand than anyone else. Um, yeah, I've had a lot of people use my Aptera referral, but I don't really care. They could scrap the whole referral program. Um, if it keeps them afloat and it makes the product exist, I'm all in favor of it. Um, yeah, if Aptera can remain independent, that's great, but I would rather them partner with someone or get bought out by someone than not exist at all. That's what I don't want to happen. But I will blame above all the investment community. The fact that the Saudis are pouring billions of dollars into a crippling, horrible company like Lucid that is just so inefficient, so wasteful with their capex, and continues to make products that no one wants. That that's what disappoints me more than anything is that Lucid is consuming 15 to 20 times as much investment money as Aptera, and Lucid is spending all that money on making vehicles that nobody wants to buy, and Aptera has made a design that so many people want to buy, that so many people have invested money in, and somehow they can't get a whale investor on board for whatever reason. I'd really like to talk to some of these big investors. I don't know any millionaires personally, or billionaires maybe, whatever. But if I met one, I would seriously like, okay, you're going to hate me by the end of this conversation because I'm basically going to try to talk you into bringing Aptera to market. Because unlike all of these other startups like Rivian and Canoe and Lucid, Aptera has a quicker path to profitability than any of them. That's what blows my mind. Like, I can't understand why investors are not. It's honestly like frustrating me. Not just like, haha, I'm angry, but like genuinely, it makes me angry that I know there's meetings going on right now. I know there's investment firms talking with Aptera, and the fact that they're too hesitant to join in, where I'm like, guys, seriously? Like, you got Lucid and Rivian asking for billions and billions, and they are talking about turning a profit like maybe 10 years from now, and Aptera's like, oh no, we could hit profitability in 2 years. We just need kind of an influx in cash at the beginning. No one wants to get on board. And why? Because it looks weird. That's it. That's all that scares you. Like, I don't think Tesla would have made it if they were around today. I don't think they would have gotten the investment they needed if they were a startup right now. The only reason Tesla exists right now is from Department of Energy loans and the right big investors at the right time. And now so many investors are so skeptical. I don't know if it's because of all the downward performance of early EV startups like Rivian and Lucid have lost so much of their value. So that makes investors now all scared because they're convinced all EV startups are now going to fail. So they just refuse to invest in anything. What do you think about Aptera would be like if Apple put the $10 billion towards them? Oh, they'd have probably hundreds of thousands of vehicles on the road. Aptera has gotten much, much, much closer to production than any other startup has with the funds they have available. You know, Rivian and Lucid have thousands of employees. Aptera has less than 100, and they're in the tooling stage. No, they're in the tooling for mass production stage. No other startup company got close to tooling for mass production with that little capital. You know, Aptera raised just a few dozen $1 million and got to a point where, like, okay, we can stamp out body panel pieces, and we're building out our battery pack assembly line now. They partnered with this company from South Korea that's already building battery modules that are going to be used in the battery management system, which they're going to talk more about later this month. All these steps that they got to with a few dozen million that most other companies required billions to get to. There's Dad. So it's time to pick up, Mom. I know. We're heading out the door. It looks weird and looks unsafe would be my response to that. I know, but that's such a baseless. I mean, people said the same thing about EVs. You could say, oh, they're too expensive and the batteries catch on fire, so I'm not going to invest in Tesla. If everyone had that mentality when Tesla was trying to raise money, like, they wouldn't have made it. They wouldn't have got the money they needed. Aptera is actually very safe, and they showed some of the crumple zone testing going on in their last update video. Honestly, one of the safer vehicles on the road, but people won't acknowledge that just because, oh, that fourth wheel magically makes your car so much safer. But no, they have a wider than an HTSA required crumple zone on the front. The outward mounted wheels don't require an axle, so the wheels and axle don't push into the cabin in a frontward collision. They have a much wider rear crumple zone than most sedans do because there's only one row of seats. They have frontal airbags, and they have a more rounded carbon fiber frame, which redistributes impacts from the sides. Wheels can absorb more of the impact because they're more outward mounted, opposed to wheels that are in front of you in a sedan. On the Aptera, they're out from you. So there's so many safety systems put in place, and Aptera put so much engineering resources into making it safe. But still, people just go, yeah, but it looks weird. Ugh. People, people are so hesitant. I want to talk to some of these billionaires. I need to talk to the CEOs of Aptera. Be like, let me at them. Let me do the talking. Let me go in there. You need. I don't know how they're talking with the billionaires, but I feel like all the people I've met at Aptera are really friendly and very polite and very respectful. You know, they shook our hands and they met with me and my wife, and they were happy to answer my wife's questions. And I brought my uncle along with me, and they answered my uncle's questions. They're just so friendly and they're so down to earth. Maybe that's their problem. When they're meeting with these investors, they're not pushy enough. If I met with some of these potential Aptera investors, I'd be so aggressive. I'd be like, if you're not investing by the end of this conversation, we're gonna be enemies. You're gonna hate me. I'm gonna make sure that you're either an investor or you're going to get a restraining order, because I'm going to be so like, this is it. Okay. Like, we need to do this as a species, as an economy. This is where it's headed. This is what has to happen. And if you don't see that, then you're an idiot. Like, that's straight up the verbiage I would use. I tend to look at life like I treat people with kindness, but I don't know. Like, at this point, I feel like we need some kind of a push here. We need someone to get a little bit more aggressive. Let me at him, Aptera. I'll work for free. Any billionaires out there that aren't convinced it's a good investment, let me at him. I'll talk them into $200 million. I'm gonna say no. We're not leaving here without a $200 million check. That's that's my goal. And you're dense and you don't know what you're talking about if you pass on this deal. Investors are skeptical because Aptera is too foreign. There's no proven market comparison. I love Aptera. I think they're fools for not taking the risk. I agree. And I think they need to hear that. I think more investors should hear that straight to their face. And I might use other words than fools. I agree it's not a proven market, but I think it absolutely would be the best selling three wheeler of all time. And it would take a noticeable chunk out of the sedan market, because most vehicles have on average 1.5 people in them. So two seats is fine. Mark Cuban seems to respond to those kinds of remarks. Good. Let me at him. I'll take Cuban. Let's go at it. I'm ready to fight someone on this. Someone who has the funds to make it happen. It's no point in arguing with people that don't have the funds, but um, like I need to win someone over. We better call Saul or something. All right, I gotta go pick up mom. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for tuning in. Hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Bye bye.